What's up, guys? Welcome to another Monday morning live. Today we have Harry Powell, who is a blue belt in Jiu-Jitsu, but he also runs a podcast and he also runs a clothing line and he also helps direct a grappling competition, which is like pretty big deal, you know. So we are going to talk to him when he comes on, which is hopefully soon. Um, you know how technology is. But before that, so the idea of this live was to talk about balance and balancing things, like balancing your work life kind of balance, I guess. Balancing your training, balancing all your kind of added extras that you want to do in your life. Here he is. And I think it's like really important to get good at balancing things. So that's the idea of this live today. So I hope you enjoy. Good morning.
Morning. How's it going?
How are you?
I'm well, thank you. I'm well. How are you?
I'm good too. I'm good. I'm just slowly waking up, you know, the Monday morning post weekend kind of is it over? Is it really over? I was enjoying it so much. But it's all good. So we are going to talk about the podcast, we're going to talk about the clothing brand, and we're going to talk about Pantheon.
Yes. All right. Cool. We can talk about all those things.
Yeah, we're going to talk about everything because, you know, why not?
Indeed.
So let's talk about the podcast first.
Yeah.
How and why did you decide to set up the podcast in the first place? Like, where did it
Sure.
come from?
That's a good question. Before we start, I'll just give a small shout out to Jack Dolan that's just joined. Jack Dolan is one of the up and coming jiu-jitsu stars of the UK. Purple belt under um, Kieran Davin over in SPG Tullamore. So yeah, big shout out to Jack. Why did I start the podcast? I started the podcast because I thought that it was important to continue long form conversation. I think that something that is remiss a lot in today's culture or today's society is that you can have satisfactory conversations with people without sitting in front of them and actually having a discourse that's longer than 15 minutes, right? And I think that our generation is way more attuned, and the generations below us are way more attuned to having conversations of in sort of bite-sized forms rather than having conversations where you can say something, I can say something, and we can go back and forth over a period of an hour, 2 hours, however long that conversation lasts for. So, yeah, I mean, that was the main driver behind the podcast. The second driver was that I enjoy having long form conversations, and I felt that if I enjoyed having them, then potentially other people would enjoy listening to them. Um,
A decent
so
assumption.
Thank you. Um, so yeah, I mean that was the basis of the podcast. Something I should clear up, however, is um, the podcast is not a jiu-jitsu podcast.
Yeah,
People
I've
have
seen that you've had other like unjiu-jitsu guests on there, and I'm like, what is this? What's
yeah.
going on here?
So, so the podcast is not a jiu-jitsu podcast. The problem with myself is most of my friendship group are in some way, shape, or form involved in jiu-jitsu or MMA or martial arts in some fashion. So when I'm starting a podcast, generally the people you're going to have on are your friends, right? Your local community, quote unquote. So most of those people are in some way, shape, or form jiu-jitsu related, but it's absolutely not a jiu-jitsu podcast.
Okay, no, that's good because I was actually going to ask you how do you go about getting your guests, because
Sure.
obviously I get guests for this show as well, and I have my way of doing it, which is basically puppy eyes until they say yes. Please come on my podcast. It's not a podcast, it's a live, but you know, I pretty much that's pretty much what I do. Just beg.
There's anything wrong with that? I mean, yeah, like for me it's not too dissimilar, to be honest. It's not too like so I've done it a couple of ways. When I first began, I did it by just asking people, do you want to come on? And if you don't, that's fine. And when I kind of branched out of my friendship group, what I've tried to do is be a little bit more, not too much, but a little bit more professional in the way that I do it. In that I try now to book sort of a month in advance. So I'll book 4 guests in advance. And when I'm reaching out to names like Robert Drysdale and Dan Strauss and these Ashley Williams, Ross Nichols, these kind of people, like I feel like it's given better results to be like, can I book you in 3 weeks for a Monday at 4 p.m. rather than being like, you got time tomorrow at 11?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I'm feeling the same as well. Like I also try to book people at least a couple of weeks in advance. Obviously I did not book you a couple of weeks in advance, but that's been it's been in my head to have you on, and I just haven't like actually typed the actual words, but I've had it in my head. And then after the Tommy's live last week, I was like, oh my God, why have I not sorted this out yet? What's wrong with me? So then I just messaged you straight away like, oh, what an idiot. Why did I not put that into action before, you know?
We've already got a prior relationship, right? So it's not like...
Yeah, so it's kind of different. Yeah, exactly. No, definitely. But no, for sure, like getting people like that are a big deal. It pays to be professional, I think.
It does.
But you have to also remember that we're all human, and ultimately, you know, I hate treating certain people different, you know, like I hate being like, oh, but you're famous, so I have to treat you differently. It's like, yeah, but you're also a human, and I'm a human, so get over it. I don't know.
Yeah. I agree. I've fallen foul of that myself, and you know, I think the one that taught me was Rob Drysdale, right? So Robert Drysdale, for people that don't know, is an ADCC champion. Beat Marcelo Garcia to get to his title, right? Beat Galvao to get to his title. You know, just a monolith of our sport. And yet, when I called him for the podcast, he was sat in a hammock with no shirt on, playing with his daughters.
Yeah, like, that sounds like Rob. He is, honestly, I freaking love that guy. Like, I mean, like, he was one of my coaches in the house, and it was like, he's still, like, I spoke to him, like, last month, and he was like, hey, when are you coming? When are you coming to train with me? Like, he's still asking me that, you know? And he's like, when are you coming to train with me? When are you coming to train with me? And I'm like, what a dude. Like, no one else has kept in contact with me like that.
Yeah.
You know, like, what a nice guy. Just, like, he's just such a decent person.
The pillar of that match was really shown in the Max Roshkov controversy. So again, for the people that weren't aware of that, in MMA there's a massive stigma about being too tough for your own good and not living to fight another day, where that is more commonplace in boxing. And what happened was Max Roshkov entered a fight on 5 days' notice with a pretty hefty weight cut and an injury in front of him. He had a decent first round, to be honest. He looks good, and then in the second round he didn't have as good of a second round, and he told Rob that he didn't want to continue the fight. And at the right time, Rob called the fight off. In the minute, he was encouraging his fighter to continue, but you know, at the end of it, Rob made the right call and took a hell of a lot of stick for that. But the way that he reacted, I think, really shows testament to who he is as a person and as a coach. And yeah, that man is a fucking legend. He's a fucking legend.
He's amazing. And actually, he's got this documentary out now, or like, I don't think it's out yet. The basically the history of jiu-jitsu film. And oh man, that's gonna be epic. But yeah, let's stop talking about Rob and start talking about you.
Okay.
So I have a feeling I might know the answer to this, but who's been your top 3 guests on the podcast so far?
Oh, gee. That's a
I was
difficult.
thinking that maybe Rob might have been number 1, but you
I
know,
don't think the one. Rob's
huh?
podcast was very good, but it was very stressful for me. It was very stressful for me because I was interviewing Rob Drysdale, right? Like, and I felt like really, I really had to be a certain way, right? It felt hard to be natural with him. After about 2 hours, I kind of let loose, and the end of that podcast was really good. But my favorite podcast, well, I think my favorite podcasts are difficult to choose, but I'll say that my first has to be Tommy, because he was the first guy that agreed to come on the podcast, and
Yep.
because he sat in my flat and we just talked absolute rubbish for 2 hours, and that
Sounds
podcast
like
is
Tommy.
that oh yeah, that podcast is still by far the most downloaded, the most listened to podcast, and it could be because it's the first, right? But I prefer to think that it's because of Tommy. I will say that my second favorite is probably yourself, as the first female to come on the podcast, because you
Woo!
know, like I've had some criticism for not having females on the podcast, but the reality is, a lot of the females that I engage with don't want to come on the podcast, and that's fine. You know, that's not really a problem. But it's something that. Yeah, so I'd say yourself for coming on as the first female, and most recently I'd say that my favorite is probably Dave Lawson. So Dave is a guy that is not a jiu-jitsu person at all, and equally is one of my old colleagues, and we just had a conversation about a plethora of things, but I think the thing that that I enjoyed about that podcast is, one, it wasn't jiu-jitsu related. Two, it's a guy that I haven't spoken to in about 6 months to a year. And three, it was just super relaxed and it was just interesting. But my I say this to my missus has just joined the live, so hello to Imogen. But like and Imogen is well aware of this, but like I'll finish a podcast and I'll go to her and be like, that was my favorite one. And then in 2 weeks, like I'll go in and be like, no, that was my favorite one.
That was my favorite one. That was my favorite one. That was my favorite one. Yeah.
Exactly, because I change, like the conversations that I have on the podcast a lot of the time, they shape the way that I think about things as well. So, you know, then dependent on the reception or the receptors that I get back from whatever the conversation is, then will depend on how I view that conversation, if that makes sense.
Completely. No, it makes total sense. And when you get, like, I find that with this show as well, like, when you get really good feedback from an episode, you like get so pumped about it, and you're like, I have to do more of that. And you know, like, oh, what was specific about that episode that I can repeat, or you know, like whatever it is, you know, it's just, it doesn't matter. Like, what can I do that again? How can I do that again? How can I replicate that? And it like pumps you up so much for future episodes, I guess.
I agree. I think the only thing I try to do is I do my best now to not look at stats, not look at YouTube views, not look at how many downloads the podcast has had. And it's hard, right? It's hard because I'm a stats person. I'm a stats kind of person. But what I'm trying to do at the moment is just do it, right? And not worry too much about framing it.
Do it for you rather than do it for people, kind of thing.
Essentially. Yeah, essentially, because then what will happen, I hope, is it will either go well and people will listen, or they won't, right? And either outcome is actually okay, because at the end of the day, as I said at the preface of the beginning of the podcast wasn't for other people. It was because I enjoyed interesting conversations. So, yeah, I mean, I do understand your point though, because I'm a hypocrite in that I say those things, but then in the back of my mind, I'm always thinking about the best ways to grow the podcast, the best ways to gain listenership, the best ways to, you know.
Yeah, but I mean, I think that's pretty natural to kind of have those. You know, you don't start something to fail it. You don't start something to go, this is going to be shit, but I'm going to do it anyway. And it's like, No, you start it because you actually want to do it and you want it to be good,
Yeah,
because that's the point of doing something. Like, but at the same time, it shouldn't all be about stats. It should be a little bit maybe, but not all be about stats. That's
yeah,
kind of how I like.
I agree.
Yeah, I don't know. So what are going on that note? What are your aims with the podcast? Like, do you want to get sponsorship? Are you like heading for Joe Rogan levels? Like, what's the deal?
So the honest answer is I don't know, mate. I don't know. I really don't know. Like
Take
what
it
the what the real plan is at the moment. What I'd like to do is speak to some people that I've never spoken to before. That's the current thing,
Yeah.
because a lot of the guys, and actually I'm doing one podcast today with a guy called James from Bullingham Visual Media. And I've spoken to him on Instagram a little bit, but I've never met him in real life, never spoken to him in real life. That will be cool. And I've got a couple of others coming up. I've got a tattoo artist coming on. And hold on, I'm just checking my schedule. I've also got a clinical researcher coming on who wants to talk about coronavirus, so we'll do that.
Nice. That's
Uh,
good.
yeah, so I've got some diversification, and I think that's the main thing at the moment is trying to diversify the guests that I can get on, because I want to diversify essentially, and then but the end goal, I have no idea really. Like, I see people saying, "Oh, you can get this sponsorship and that sponsorship," but frankly, was never to do about money. It was never to do with money.
No.
If somebody comes to me and says, "Oh, I want you to do the podcast, and we're going to pay you X amount a month to do it, and that's enough for me to quit my job," sure, we can talk about money, but the likelihood of that is minimal, right? Until you get to somewhere that's like a Rogan level. But that level's pretty insane, to be honest. Like, I'm happy
Yeah.
to talk about stats of mine. Like, pre-coronavirus time, I'd say that an episode would get anywhere from sort of 80 to 200 downloads. Tommy's is a little bit different, and equally the ones with Liam Cann and Robert Deagle and Drysdale have been slightly different. But normally, like a regular guest, quote unquote, would get anywhere from like 80 to 150 listens, 200 listens, right? Now, during the pandemic, you're lucky to get 60. And,
Wow. Well,
and
people
I
aren't driving as much, are they? So they're not
people aren't
listening to, yeah.
people, and I think that the effort, the idea of the effort involved to sit down and listen to an hour and a half, a 2 hour podcast is way larger than if you were driving for an hour anyway and it was just in the background. So,
Yep.
that's not me saying that from an emotional standpoint. That's just me saying
No,
this.
it's true. Yeah.
But yeah, I think the numbers will be what they'll be. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm not gonna put money. I put some money into Instagram advertising, and whilst that post got tons of likes, the listens didn't change. So
Right.
either my Instagram advertising isn't great, or Instagram advertising just doesn't work for podcasting, and I don't know what the
Mm.
answer is. I kind of felt a bit strange putting money into it anyway, because it's kind of like, I already pay X amount for a podcast subscription and for this and for the kit and for that and the next thing. So, yeah, if somebody comes and wants to pay me a bucket load of money for me to just sit at my desk and talk to people, grand. But the likelihood of that, I think, is very minimal at the current time. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I get that. So how do you fit like recording, editing, and everything else around your day job? And what is your day job actually? Because I don't even know this.
Okay, so the easiest, I'm almost like Chandler from Friends in that the easiest way to describe my job is I'm an IT engineer, and
Okay.
for people that don't know / don't care, which is the majority, that's what I do. But how do I fit it in? Well, life's pretty busy at the moment, to be honest. Life's pretty busy in that I have various plates to spin alongside my day job. But how do I fit it in? Well, to be honest, a lot of the recording I generally do on a Monday evening. I'm looking to move to a Sunday daytime, but then when the recording is finished, if the guest has decent enough Wi-Fi or decent enough network connection, then the editing is really easy. It's really easy. Like, for me, I don't censor anything. I give the guest an opportunity to censor. So I'll provide them with the podcast and say, have a listen. If there's anything you don't want to keep in, let me know and I'll take it out. But for me, like, I'm not taking anything out. If I say something stupid, I've said something stupid. If they say something stupid and they're happy to keep it in, cool, they've said something stupid and it's going to go.
Yeah.
So the actual editing process is relatively light, unless, of course, there are network problems. Then it takes me a little bit longer. And then I chuck the podcast into an editing tool called DaVinci Resolve. What I can then do is I can strip out the audio. I can post that to just the audio only platform. And then I add a couple of graphics onto the YouTube thing, a couple of introductions, a couple of Instagram handles, blah, blah, blah. And then I chuck that up on YouTube. And the editing itself generally will take me anywhere from sort of an hour to 3 hours.
Okay, that's not too bad.
It's not too bad at all, right? And I can fit into a weekend or whatever. I try my best to get the editing done quickly, because then it's done and it can just sit there and wait to be scheduled and put out. Then, you know, I build some artwork, but the artwork again is all templated and all that sort of stuff.
Yes.
So
Change the name.
essentially all it is somebody sends me a photo, I input the photo onto the Photoshop template, and that's it. Like, it's very, very simple. The workflow for that, actually, like, I had a friend that was starting a podcast and asked me, how do I do this stuff? And I ran them through everything. And it seems like a lot when you go through it, but that's because when I first started podcasting, like, I was doing everything the wrong way, essentially. And it was taking me hours to do everything. Whereas, you know, you'll know, the more that you do something, the more efficient it becomes, right?
Of course. Yeah, of course. And you build up a system and you're like, right, that's what I do and that's what I do and that's it, done. And it's easy, pretty much.
Yeah, absolutely that.
So being that you are so busy already, why did you set up a clothing line as well?
Yeah, so...
Great question, right?
Yeah.
Would you also like to know the answer?
The answer at some point, because there's a potential, and probably I won't say too much right now, but there's a potential that myself and Liam are going to invest in another jiu-jitsu organization, and put our time to that. So yeah, I mean, again, like, Liam calls me, he's like, do you want to do this? And I was like, yeah, but I just don't.
We're always like, yes, and then go, why did I say yes again?
Yeah, exactly that. But yeah, so why did I start the clothing brand? I started the clothing, well, okay, so let's give a formal update on the clothing brand for the 2 people that are listening. It's like...
There will be more on the replay, trust me.
Yeah. So at the moment, the problem that I have with the clothing brand is the way that things work when you get things manufactured from abroad. Generally, unless you have a good relationship with a factory and with a specific company, is that what you'll find is there'll be 1 or 2 people that'll put on Instagram or come to you and message you pretending to be this multinational, multi-global organization that can provide you with all this stuff, right? In reality, what I've learned is what happens is they go to the market on that morning and they buy their materials, and they'll buy their materials from whichever seller will sell them the cheapest, right? From then, they'll take that to the factory, and the factory generally is like a massive hot desking facility where there is sewing machines and print presses and, you know, sublimation machines and all this stuff dotted everywhere. And somebody will go up and they'll say, let's say you're running the factory, and they'll say, morning, Helen, I'd like a desk to do some sublimation today. And you're like, cool, go to desk 13. But tomorrow when I come and see you, it may be desk 17. And that sublimation machine is slightly different. It's a different make, and there's different ink, it's different, different this, there's different that. So, you know, what I don't want to do is drop $5,000 into stock and it'd be beautiful the first time, and then loads of people, you send it, you send for another, it comes back and it's totally fucking different. So at the moment, the thing that I am looking to do is find a manufacturer, one, that has all of the ethical principles that I care about in place. I don't want stuff that comes out of a sweatshop. I don't want stuff where people are, you know, essentially slave laboring to make it. I don't want stuff that's made from unsustainable places. Now, this will affect my price points, right? It will affect the amount that I have to pay to get that material. But I think it's more important than just going to whoever it is on Instagram and just chucking some money in and seeing what happens. So that's at the moment where the brand is. But to go back to your question, why did I start? I started because there are people in this industry, in the jiu-jitsu industry, and, you know, in MMA as well, that they've put 10 years of their life into this. Let's say they've got a black belt and they're making next to no money from teaching that thing that they've spent 10 years in, right? And that to me is absolutely fucking ludicrous. It's insane to me that you could put, like, let's say you are a doctor or a lawyer or a banker or an economist or, you know, one of these more mainstream job roles.
Yeah.
If you put 10 years of your life in, the likelihood is you'll be able to live from the wage that you make. Yes. I would say, their assessment, right? Yeah. And the same if you're a builder or you're, you know, an electrician or any of these jobs. Now, the reason for that is because there's a profession behind it. And that's the key word for me is profession. And at the moment, jiu-jitsu is as far away from being a professional sport as you can get. There's no governing body. There's no, agreed rule set. The closest we have to a governing body is an IBJJF. And the IBJJF is a business at the end of the day.
And it's corrupt as fuck as well.
Sure. But like, there's nothing wrong with the IBJJF being a business. There's no problem with them putting on the rules, putting on, you know, the costings they want, because they have to make money at the end of the day. That's fine. But what it does do is, you know, there are some guys that I am aware of and some guys that I know that make £400, £500 a month from teaching classes at black belt.
Yeah.
That's right. They then also want to be world champions, right? So explain to me how you're going to be a world champion if you don't even have enough money to pay rent to live in a place. Do you know what I mean? Like, not everywhere is pedago submission fighting where you can sleep at the gym and live at the gym. You know, some people have families and people they need to support and all this kind of stuff. So the main idea behind the clothing brand is almost like a non-profit. So what I'd like to do is the profits that I make from the brand, if I ever manage to find a fucking manufacturer and put some stuff out, is I would like to sponsor athletes, but sponsor them in a fashion that is not just, here's some kit, wear it to my event and look cool. It's, okay, what events do you want to do this year? They say, I want to do this, this, and this. Okay, cool. Well, the brand can pay for your accommodation, your flights, and your entry. Now go train, right? And then if the brand grows large enough, then I'd like to essentially give a salary to these athletes and say, okay, how much do you earn a month? And this would be relative to each athlete, right? It's like, how much do you earn a month? Okay, let's top that up by X amount, you know? And obviously that's a very utopian thing to think, because jiu-jitsu doesn't make any money, right? Therefore, the idea of me selling a brand, but look, there are brands that have done it. Scramble, Tatami, Hyperfly, Kings, Show Your Roll, like all of these brands are now reputable brands, and I see no reason why I can't do the same. Obviously, there's a specific unique selling point that I'm trying to get across, and that's the idea of doing essentially a non-profit. Like, I wouldn't be taking any money from it. Obviously, I'd be putting money back into the brand to make sure that I can buy new shit and I can, you know, make the brand bigger and whatever. But you know, I'm not bothered. I'm not looking to take a wage from the brand. I'm just to make athletes' lives a little bit easier so that they can go and do the thing that they want to do.
That's a pretty awesome reason, to be honest. I mean, I think if you can get that out there, then the brand will grow like really quick. Like, honestly, like when you obviously have the manufacturing sorted out and everything like that.
I hope so.
I think that will sell. It's the whole concept is a very kind of, it's nice. It's friendly, you know, it makes you want to buy into it. Like, it makes me want to buy into it. And I don't buy anything because, as you can see, I'm sponsored.
You are Helen Hellray.
Shout out to Whiskey Wolf. But for real, like, you know, it's difficult to have a brand that people want to buy into. Of course it's difficult, you know. So, and that
there's not a lot of training, especially now when there's not a lot of money floating around. This is my other consideration, right? My other consideration is that, you know, what I don't want to do here, I'm just fucking sorting out my barnet. What I don't want to do is chuck a bucket load of money into something to then have it sat in my flat. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, one, because my missus would hate me at the idea of, you know, having 50 gis and 100 rash guards just kicking around the place. But also because, you know, if I'm going to do something, as we've already said, if I'm going to do something, I'd like to do it. I'd like to get it done. I'd like to get it done properly. So, yeah, but you're right. Like, you're right. I'd like to think that it's something that people would buy into. I'd like to think so. And look, in the same vein as the podcast, if I do it and it doesn't work, then okay, it doesn't work. That's okay. Like, I tried to do something, and obviously, I wouldn't just try it once and then that would be it. I do my best, but yeah, it's been an idea for a little while, and as with everything, I just hadn't pulled the plug, but I'm now attempting to pull the plug. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you're further on it now than you were the last time we spoke, which potentially was when I came on your podcast.
Yeah, when was that? Let's have a look when that was. Hold on.
May, June, something like that.
It was early. It was early. That's for sure. Yeah, you were episode 19, May the 18th.
There you go, May. I knew it was May. So you're further on now than you were then. So that's progression.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the other thing that I'm doing is, you know, I have my day job, I have the podcast, I have my own training, I have Pantheon, I have the clothing brand, I have potentially this other investment, I have my writing for Attack the Back, and I also want to spend time with my partner and have a life with my friends, right? So I'm not putting myself under drastic amounts of pressure to get this thing out. I'm kind of just, you know, I'm doing my bit every day to kind of further this thing along, but I'm not being like, I need something out by the 1st of October, because the likelihood is it's just not going to happen, right? So yeah, I mean, yeah, progression in the smallest bit, but I'm just, as I said, I'm just seeing how it goes, right? Like,
Yeah, no, for sure. And speaking of Pantheon as well, how did you actually get involved in that whole situation? Like, how did you get involved with Pantheon?
Yeah, so that's a good question. I should probably take the time before I do this just to preface with just an incredibly huge shout out to Liam Khan. So for those people that don't know Liam Khan, he is one of the head coaches of Scramble Academy Leeds. He is also one of the founding directors of Pantheon. Liam is a very interesting person in the jiu-jitsu sphere. He's a black belt. He's, you know, a storied competitor. He's been on Polaris a couple of times, like, you know, all of this sort of stuff. I don't know whether I can announce that, actually. Never mind. He has some news in December. But yeah, he's one of these guys that just knows everyone, right? So the way that we first started talking to Rob Drysdale is he was like, I wonder if I've got Rob Drysdale's number. He's just got Rob Drysdale's number and calls him, and we have a conversation for 2 hours with Rob Drysdale. You know, he can just text Shanji Ribeiro. He can just text Gordon Ryan's manager. He can, you know, it's just so fucking strange that you've got these kind of people's numbers, but he just knows everyone, right? And it's really odd, but really cool. And anyway, like, how I first met Liam, because it's probably relevant to the story. How I first met Liam is I saw on Twitter that Faraz Sahabi had posted saying that he was doing a seminar in the UK in like 2 days. And I was like, fuck me, where is that? And I clicked on the link and it took me to Scramble Academy Leeds on Facebook. And I didn't even have a Facebook account at this point. So I reinstated a Facebook account. I messaged the academy and was like, look, I know I'm not a member. Is there any chance? And Liam answered and he was like, look, if you can pay me today for the seminar, then we'll do it. Like, we'll bring you on. And I was like, amazing. There was two left for the seminar. One of them, then they were supposed to be for members only, but yeah, I paid Liam and he allowed me to do the seminar, and I went up and, you know, I spoke to them and I took some baked goods and you know, it just kind of started from there, really. Like, we, after the seminar, we all went and we ate with Faraz Sahabi for about 3 hours while he talked about why gravity wasn't real. And that was just so surreal. But, you know, on the back of that, I went out to Montreal and I trained with Faraz for a month, and he remembered me and all this kind of stuff. And, you know, with Liam then, like, me and Liam we just connected and we just started speaking just generally. And I went up to Leeds, and I do go up to Leeds relatively often to go and train at Scramble. So again, if you're in the north of England and you need somewhere to train, when Scramble's new facility is open, go and train there. And yeah, then Liam was telling me about this thing that he had going called Pantheon, and like, it was just, you know, it was a submission grappling event, and I went to Pantheon 1 just as a fan, really. And then I ended up working Pantheon 2 as a runner. And then afterwards I said to Liam, like, is there any, like, I just fed him a couple of ideas for matches for Pantheon 3. And he liked them, and he was like, do you want to do some shit for Pantheon? And I was like, yes, is the short answer. So I started out just doing the media stuff. So just doing the Instagram and just collating stuff. And then now me and Liam do the matchmaking hand in hand, and, you know, we kind of run everything. So we have a third director who's called Sam Townend, and Sam Townend is, he runs a massive like events company, but for dance events. He puts like club nights on, and that,
right.
Like Creamfields and all that sort of stuff is those are the kind of Tidy Weekender. These are the kind of things that he puts on. So whilst he does jiu-jitsu, he's less involved in that scene, and also he's got his own shit to deal with. So me and Liam kind of deal with the putting the event together, and then we go to Sam and we're like, this is the venue, this is the marketing, like, help us with this sort of stuff, and that's how it works. So yeah, me and Liam do all the actual event type stuff, and then we hand over to Sam to do all the difficult things, right? We get to do the fun shit and Sam has to do the difficult things. But yeah, that's how it came about, really. It's very happenstance, to be honest. Like, being in you know, taking, I hate all the cliche bullshit that you hear of, like, oh, you know, you miss all the chances you don't take and all that crap, but really, it only came, all of this stuff only came from me seeing that Faraz Sahabi seminar and doing what I could to get in that room, and then getting in that room. And since then, I mean, it reminds me similarly of your story of The Ultimate Fighter, to be honest. You know, like, you got in the room, and although the first time you got in the room, it didn't go how you wanted it to go, the second time you got in the room, they were well aware of who was in the room.
Yeah, well, yeah, because they recognized me from the first time, and they were like, we liked you before, you didn't have enough experience, what have you done since? And I was like, I've had like 8 fights. And they were like, right, you're in. Pretty much.
Get in.
Yeah. Like, you've obviously made the effort to get better. Yeah. So, yeah, I think, like, I guess people appreciate. There was another girl, actually, who'd been to an audition before. She was a 135er. And she'd been to, it was her, my second time in the audition, it was also her second time, but we hadn't been to the same first audition, but we were both at the same second audition. Because they did 115ers and 135ers at the same time on the second one for 23, because they were deciding which one to do. Mm-hmm. And she went in there and she said to me before, she was like, oh, I haven't had any fights since my last audition. And I was like, that sounds really, to me, that sounds really bad. And she was like, oh, yeah, they said I was, and then she came back out and she's like, oh, they said I still wasn't experienced enough. And like, I wasn't doing enough to, you know, to further my career. And I was like, I didn't want to say anything because I was like, I kind of agree with them.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you know, like I don't want to be harsh, but if you're not putting the effort in, then you can't expect it to come back. Yeah,
exactly. And I think as well, when you've been given a set of requirements, you then know what's needed of you, right? And of course, you know, those things are not easy things. You know, going and having 8 fights is not easy, right? It's not easy to go through 8 training camps. It's not easy to make 8 walks. It's not easy to, you know, do all of these things. But if the thing that you want is to get in the room and somebody in the UFC be like, oh yeah, we like you, what have you done? And you can say, oh yeah, I had 8 fights, and they'd be like,
I've done this. Yeah,
cool.
Exactly.
Cool. All right, cool. You've clearly shown, you know, what we asked of you, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I think that, you know, those things are quite simple. And I think as well, when you have something that you're passionate about, and sometimes, like, I question whether I'm even passionate about jiu-jitsu, to be honest, you know, and that's not me being any way, but it's like when you do something so much, I think sometimes you're just like, okay, like, am I doing this because it's fun, or am I doing this because it's something that I do, right?
It's a habit.
Yeah, but I find myself coming back to it in some fashion. So I guess that, you know, my passion is there somewhere. But yeah, I mean, I think, you know, when you have the opportunity to do stuff, at least the thing that me and my partner talk about all the time is just do the thing, right? Just do the thing. Say yes and do the thing. And what's going to happen is going to happen, right? Like, you know, take the opportunity and see where it takes you. And that's
yeah. And like, just make a decision. It doesn't, like, it might be the wrong one, but you made a decision and it was the right one of that time. So does it matter?
Yeah.
Like, probably not. You know, when do you reckon that the next Pantheon will be on, or have you just kind of gone, let's just see what happens and hopefully next year we'll roll something out?
So I don't know is the answer. I don't know. So looking at doing Pantheon 3, it was May time, April-May time, and we had some really great matches on there. We were going to get yourself on there, as you know, but somebody decided to get injured.
Sorry.
Like we had three really big matches lined up for that. We had Victor Hugo, Felipe Andrew, and obviously for anyone that's been watching the scene, like, those guys have competed like 6 times now. We were going to have Gio Martinez versus Ash Williams. We were then going to have Ross competing against, hopefully, PJ Barch. But like, you know, then coronavirus really dampened those down. And we've tried to put on something behind closed doors previously, and that has just been extremely difficult. I don't know whether we're going to be able to do something like Grapplefest has done or Polaris has done. I just don't know. The real problem with those things are you can't sell any tickets, and the sell pay-per-view is difficult, right? And obviously we've just signed with a massive partner in Flow Grappling, which is something that we're incredibly excited about. That's something that we're really hoping will help us to kick on to the next level, not just from an audience perspective, because obviously they're following on Instagram and those kind of things is absolutely massive, but also it helps us to connect with, it helps us to become more legitimate, right? If an overseas fighter sees, oh, this show's on Flow Grappling, then that means something, right? That means something. Exactly. So I would personally love to put on something behind closed doors, but especially now with Boris saying that any group over 6
is on.
Right? Exactly.
Yeah.
It then becomes more difficult because we then have to understand, do we have the elite competition status or do we not? And if we don't, how do we get that, right? So yeah, I don't know is the short answer. I really don't know. I would love to put something on. But I also, you know, it's important for us to provide athletes with a platform to compete. But equally, if somebody slaps us with a 10 grand fine, the likelihood is that Pantheon doesn't exist anymore, right? So we have to make sure that we're looking at this from a longevity perspective rather than from the perspective of just getting a name out there very quickly. Yeah.
Yeah, no, definitely. I agree. So just a bit more like kind of, I say quick fire questions,
Sure.
but
Yeah,
I mean,
sure.
they don't have to be quick answers. Don't worry. I do. Exactly. Do you enjoy competing yourself?
Oh, Jesus Christ. That's not a quick fire answer, is it? Yes, is the short answer.
Yes. Okay. Where do you train?
Where do I train? I train in a variety of different places. My main gym is London Shoot Fighters East. I also train at Fight City Gym Moorgate. I also have done a little bit of training with Ross Nichols at Gymbox, RGA Gymbox, or just Gymbox now. And then I suppose I have to say Scramble Academy Leeds as well.
Awesome. Shout out to your favorite training partners or most often training partners.
Okay.
Tommy, obviously.
Sorry, I give a shout out to Snorlax in Disguise on Instagram, which is Mr. Tom Hughes. I have to give a shout out to the person that can never make a session on time, which is Tom Allen. I have to give a shout out to Malik Narb and Amir Narb, two of the best up and comers that you're going to see. Tommy Yip has to get a shout out as one of my main training partners and coach. Yeah, and probably my missus as well, to be honest, because she gets ragdolled around the place all the time. So a shout out to Imogen as a training partner as well.
Well, bless her. Does she actually train?
Yeah, she does. Yeah,
Okay, cool.
She did a bit of kickboxing, and now she predominantly does the gi, which is ridiculous to me, but you know, somebody has to do it. So
That's well, I'm kind of glad to hear that she actually trains and you're not just abusing her, because you know.
She's way stronger than I am. I tell you, she's incredible. Good.
Good. I approve. I very much approve. Okay, last question. How can people get in contact with you?
Oh yeah, good question. So you can find me. It's so strange doing this the other way around. It's so strange.
I know.
Around. My Instagram is BJJ_Harry Powell. I'm pretty sure my Twitter is the same. I'm just checking. Hold on. How do I even do that? Profile, I guess. Yeah, okay. So my Twitter is the other way around. My Twitter is Harry Powell_BJJ. If you follow me on Instagram, you will find all of the podcast episodes. You can find the podcast on YouTube. The YouTube channel is called All About Balance. Go and have a look at Pantheon Promotions as well for any of the Pantheon updates. The Balance Jiu-Jitsu is BalanceJJ_clothing, I believe. Go and have a look at that. I mean, there's barely anything on there, but there's some stuff that will come out of that.
It exists.
Eventually, yeah. And yeah, shoot me a message if you want to talk about anything. If you want to come on the podcast, let me know. We can do that. Yeah, just holler at your boy, I guess.
Amazing. Thank you so much for coming on. Really appreciate it. Any last words you want to say, shout anyone else out?
I mean, I think I've obviously given Liam a shout out. I think the only other two people I want to shout out, one, it is Tommy, because I think that Tommy doesn't get enough recognition for actually what he does in the scene. He's very well known for people that know, but look, this is a man that is, geez, I'm going to get his age wrong, but I think he's like 24, right?
He's 25. Oh, no, he might be 20. He's 24 or 25. Yeah, I know. I can't remember either. I did write it down last week, but no, I can't remember.
This guy has the busiest class in in Fight City Gym Moorgate. You know, other jiu-jitsu classes, you could be looking at 15 people. Before coronavirus, Tommy was getting 45 to 50 people on the mats. That is insane. It's an insane achievement. You know, he is a black belt now. He's a man that competes whenever he can. He's game, get gi or no gi. He's just, and the amount of time that he puts into his students is unreal. Like, his classes are an hour, right? So you go for an hour, and then for 2.5 hours afterwards, he'll be sat at the side of the mat asking questions, showing details, talking to students, doing this, doing that. It's so rare that you see someone put that amount of time and effort into their craft and is so then willing to give that information away, right? So I think as a competitor and as a coach, I have to give him a massive shout out. And I think as a person, I'd also like to give him a shout out. The other person is yourself, right? Like for people that have followed you over the course of coronavirus, you've been putting out bountiful kettlebell workouts, which make me feel like a fat slob. And, you know, just for being open and honest, I think is something that's really, really difficult in this time, especially in a public sphere like Instagram. So I think I'd like to shout yourself out for doing it, and for just being as honest as you can be, really.
I can't switch it off. I think that's the main issue there. It just is what it is. It just is what it is. But I appreciate that. So thank you very much. Well, thank you so much for coming on. I really, really, really appreciate it, and I appreciate like all the time that you've given. So thank you, and I will tag all your various Instagram accounts in in the comments. So if anyone wants a quick way to get in touch, then they can just jump on. Amazing. Thank you so much, and I imagine we'll talk very soon.
Yes, absolutely. Have a wonderful day, and I'll speak to you soon.
You too. See you later. Bye.